Ghost Cult Magazine is honored to welcome in author JJ Anselmi. How are you doing, man?
Oh, great, Keith. Thanks so much, man. And yeah, I really got to say thank you for being so understanding. I have a 4-month-old, and you had reached out, I think, either right before my wife gave birth or right afterward, and just been super understanding about rescheduling and just as my brain and life is basically revolving around the schedule of a 4-month-old child, So thanks so much, man. It's an honor. I love Ghost Cult. Hell yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. Listen, don't worry about a thing. First of all, family first, always and forever. And secondly, yeah, listen, your life is no longer your own. You're unfortunately
Yep.
for you and your,
Yeah.
I'm sure, lovely wife, your life is now given over to a tyrannical, uncontrollable baby human, and that's
Yeah.
it. Like that's just it
Yeah.
now.
It's also very cute, but
Oh, that's good.
yeah.
Fill them up with love and music and make them into a good person. That's all you have to do. Keep them alive.
Yeah.
Bare minimum, keep them alive
Exactly.
and fill them up with goodness. The rest will take care of itself, probably.
Yeah, well, we have our jam. I've just been curious about like what point in life does your brain start to get shaped by music, or I don't know. But anyway, we have our daily jams, and so I play all kinds of stuff for her. The other day it was Buzz Oven. Today it was Soundgarden. We do some Tool and just all over the place. Yeah, just all kinds of different stuff.
I have found that children, for whatever reason, love Tool. I don't know why this is. I love Tool personally, but it's like I don't know if it's the rhythms or the Maynard's voice possibly sometimes being very soothing, but babies love Tool. I don't know why.
Yeah, she likes it. I think it's like heavy. I mean, it's it's not the most abrasive music, but I still think of Tool as a heavy band. But she seems to dig it.
For sure, man. I was over the moon for that last Tool record. I could not have, if you had all the jokes and memes about waiting forever, and here's me waiting for the Tool record, and it's a skeleton at the keyboard. Yeah. But like they knocked it out of the park, and I don't know how many more of those we're gonna get. But like, if you got to come back and shut up everybody, they did it.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing, we were kind of, talking about just just covering mainstream versus like underground bands. And I will say one thing I really respect Tool for is they always take cool bands on tour with them that I think, they have Big Business and ISIS and Melvins and Phantomos and all these rad bands, and who I don't think a lot of those fans would have heard of anyway. And I mean, to kind of get into the book, when I was like you kind of mentioned earlier about, just kind of getting to know people through journalism, and you do end up becoming friends. It's one of, I think, probably the raddest thing, really. And so I think one of the people who I really connected with through this whole process is Henry Wilson, the drummer from Floor. And he, he's good buddies with Danny Carey. And it's so sick to hear that like Danny Carey is a Floor fan, which you would never like, he's like this super technical, like precise drummer, and Floor is just crushing, gargantuan, just total caveman shit. So yeah, respect for Tool.
Absolutely. And yeah, man, it's funny how the 6 degrees of separation. I recently interviewed, I shouldn't say this, I interviewed Killing Joke during the last Tool tour at the end of 2019. And then it was such a rambling interview. I didn't know what to do with it, honestly, because it was just, I was like, so Jazz, how's, what's going on? And then he just went for an hour, and I was like, I don't know what to do with this as an interviewer. So we just hung on to it. And I recently put it up on our YouTube, and he loves Tool. He hated the tour with Tool. He was like, I will never do an arena tour. It's like, we don't see them or hang out. Yeah. We go on early. No one cares. No one's there. Our people are really not coming to see us.
Right.
He's like, I don't care about selling merch. I want to communicate my music to people who are invested. And a giant arena, he really went nuts. And I was, it's not controversial, but it was funny. He's like, I love making money, and I like being able to continue the band and sell tickets, and that's nice, and go, support a band I really respect, but also never again. No arena tours ever.
Yeah, that would be weird to And I've heard similar things. Like my buddy told me about seeing Melvins with Tool and then just getting booed off stage, which is just like, I mean, to me, Melvins is a better band than Tool. And, they're just like, I would even argue they're more influential in a lot of ways. And so, yeah, I can imagine, being in Killing Joke, it's just like this legendary band, and they're not used to having like indifferent crowds to Killing Joke. That would be fucking weird.
Right.
Yeah.
Right on. And I had seen them just like half a year earlier in their own show, and it was enrapturing, and everybody, it was like 2-hour performance of them just bugging out and playing whatever they wanted, new stuff, old stuff. And I also saw all those other tours, and I agree about Melvin's. And actually, there's a really great story, if you ever hear it, that Buzz tells about Fantomas opening for Tool, and Tool didn't really know Patton outside of they didn't know him at the time, because it was like, they knew, for whoever in the group was like Fantomas or their management, they didn't really like know Patton too well. And like Patton was like, whatever, I did this thing already. I did big arena shows. I don't care about them. And they were like, what's his problem? And it's like, no, it's not his problem. He's just Patton. So Buzz told me a few funny stories like that. But yeah, man. So yeah, I came to be aware of you through your writing, and then I heard about Doomed to Fail, which is out now, and I was like, oh, this guy's going to do a really good job. But I didn't know how good a job. So we did a book countdown last year at the end of the year, and I don't always do the books that came out. We try to do, like with our albums, we don't do listicles at Ghost Cult. I try not to. I think everybody else does that. I don't want to be nothing personal. I don't want to be Loudwire or Kerrang ill. And we don't really do listicles, but we do the end of year list. The writers seem to like it. The fans seem to react. The bands and labels seem occasionally to share it. But I started doing a series of videos, like, let's do the top live streams we had this year. Let's do the top books that I read. Maybe they didn't come out this year, but the books that I read. So I got my hands on Doomed to Fail. And it was so good, man. You did such a beautiful job with it. And again, I had followed you a little bit before that. So for the people who might be familiar with your work at AV Club or, Cult Nation or anywhere else you've been, written for yourself for a while. But I was like, this book is, anybody who loves sludge, doom, any of these sort of micro genres or subgenres that have really like buoyed heavy music for the last like 2 generations. Yeah. This book is like right up your alley, and it's so well done. I really couldn't even get over it. I had to reread some of it a couple of times just to kind of take it all in.
Well, thank you so much, man. That really means a ton. And I love hearing, it should be like a, doom and sludge. There's like the depressive, gloomy aspect, but at the same time, there's, it's also just rad riffs, parts of it. And so I think a lot of it, I wanted to make kind of similar to the experience of just listening to like a sleep riff or something that has like a fun, quality to it. Because I mean, at the same time, there's the uglier stuff that's not really, that I think is really interesting, but not fun to listen to, like Sun. I would never describe Sun as like, what a fun listening experience that was.
Yeah, I mean, I love their music, and I photographed them, and it was like horrible. I was dying from just like, I get it. I love the atmosphere. I love theatrics. I'm a theater kid at heart, and I always will be. So hate Ghost all you want. I love Ghost. I love King Diamond. I love anything. I love Capes and Cloaks and Fog, but also I was like, this is miserable. Oh my God.
Yeah, well, that's probably one of the most punishing shows I've ever seen in my life. Yeah. I went with my sister when they were doing the Monoliths and Dimensions tour. I saw it in Denver, where I was living at the time, and we were both wearing like good earplugs. I always make sure I always get the like custom earplugs or whatever that like actually fit your ears, because I just have gone to so many stupidly loud shows and played in bands that are so ridiculously loud, and I do have some tinnitus, and hearing loss just like completely freaks me out. But anyway, Sun. So we both had our earplugs, and I put this in the Sun chapter, but it's just like the sound is weighing on you so much that it just kind of spins you into this super weird headspace, and I mean, the thing I always tell people is as soon as the show was over, we went outside and my sister just threw up all over the place because the sound was just, it's just weighing on you the entire time. And I totally, like, nobody was surprised really. And she was totally sober. It was just like, everybody understood, like, oh yeah, I can see why that would make you throw up.
Right, a physical reaction. Yeah, I had almost the opposite reaction from the other end of my body. So not great. And yeah, loudest shows ever. I sung Motorhead a couple of times. For some reason, I saw a really loud show with the Atlas Moth, which Stavros was disappointed to hear that the sound was so bad and so loud, even though I love that band and I love him. And a couple of others. I think I went to an actual like Guinness Book of World Records loud Korn show, which you and I were talking about Korn a little offline. So like they literally brought the Guinness people, and you pay Guinness like several $1,000s to come out and test you.
Oh, okay.
I don't think, like that's like an unknown secret, like a common thing. Like Guinness gets paid to show up. Even if you don't break a record, they get paid. And you fly them out, and they showed up to an arena show. And it was like Korn and Stained on Stained's first national tour. Boy, who knew that was gonna go the way it went? But anyway, very loud. And I also played in a lot of bands. I love riffs and loudness, and I'm a bassist, so I was always had like the drummer to my right. So my right ear is like, meh, some days it's not so good. And I always played obscenely loud bass. And I love just riff-based music going. I love that you really explored music going back to like psychedelic rock, garage rock, gently kind of covered the genesis of guitar-driven music and brought it all the way up to today, which is not something, I don't know anyone that would have done that but you. I think you have a passion for this and your curiosity that really took this book in some amazing places.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it's a funny story about the kind of origins of distortion and stuff, because really, so after my first book is a memoir. It's, kind of like personal narrative about growing up in Wyoming and being a metalhead and just all these kind of crazy experiences of riding BMX and falling into drugs and all this stuff. But so I feel like, the material for that one was all there. I knew I'd wanted to write that book forever. And so for the second one, it took quite a while to figure out what I wanted to do. And so one of the first things I thought I would do was a history of guitar distortion and amplification. And that's where some of that stuff came from. And I realized partway as I got like further into that I had like just a realization. I was like, okay, actually what I want to do is write about heavy bands that use amplification. And then I was just like, actually, what I really, really want to do is do the history of doom metal. Yeah, so it was like it came from like an early incarnation. But yeah, it was like super fascinating to learn about that stuff, that amplification is, in essence, it was an accident. It came from a fucked up, distortion, I should say. It came from a fucked up amplifier, and that's where they got fuzz distortion and ended up just like completely upending the music world.
Nice. Is that the Ike Turner story where his amp fell off a roof rack of a car while they were doing the Chitlin circuit, for lack of a better explainer? We should come up with a better name for that historically, by the way, than Chitlin circuit. I know what it denotes and why. And, and his amp fell off the roof and the cone broke, and they didn't have another cone and they didn't have another amp, and he played through it, and people like, that's interesting.
Yeah.
People didn't run away. Some people really liked it. Other people would have been like, oh, back in, especially if you think about the records that came out in the 50s and early 60s, they were very clean.
Yeah.
Very clean.
Yeah. And I think there was some earlier, there's like a surf rock style guitarist, and he'd basically get distortion from just playing so hard, but it still wasn't like necessary. It wasn't a intentional use of like the technology, really, or the technicians didn't intend for that use, I should say.
Right. And it's the same thing I think about, like the Stones, right? Took blues riffs like Satisfaction to such a it's a groovy little riff, but it's not necessarily heavy sounding. But I think the music makes it heavy, and the performance makes it heavy emotionally, but not heavy like we imagine heavy music just a few years later would be.
Well, yeah, and I think for another thing in that kind of early portion of the book. And I think it's something I've always tried to do, of just trying to put myself in that headspace of that time and era, and just really imagine like what would that have sounded like to people at that time. So yeah, at the time, when the Stones came out with I Can't Get No Satisfaction, and there's that crazy distorted guitar, it just would have been just like, whoa, what the fuck. And I think putting myself in that headspace, it makes me appreciate bands like Coven and Black Sabbath even more, because I'm like, man, look at what was happening at the time. It was all, it's flower power and love songs. And then here comes Coven, and it's just like straight up satanic ritual, and they were full on into that stuff. It was real for them. And then Sabbath, I can't even imagine what it would have been like to hear Black Sabbath, the actual song back in the day when it first came out. It just made heads explode. It's crazy.
For sure. I'm a huge Coven fan also, and Jinx is one of my high moments of my career so far, and interviewing Jinx. And if we get a Coven record next year, I might just like, shit myself, because like I would love for it to hear like a brand new, completely brand new Coven album like today. And sick. I know it's in the works, and the pandemic kind of put it on pause a little, but like
okay. I didn't know they were working on a new one.
Yeah, she's got her core band that she works with now, and I know she's going to do a lot of touring. The demand is very high.
Yeah.
And a lot of people like to refute me on the Coven stuff, and like, okay, like I know that to some people, especially because it's a woman,
right?
A lot of people find the stories outlandish, but she actually lived this shit. And I give myself a little bit of credit in that a lot of people asked me, and she even was surprised. She's like, "Oh, you didn't want to know about any of the salacious Hollywood stories and this and that." Right. I was like, let somebody else tell that. I want to talk about music and your singing and how you got into music and why you do what you do and like why you still do what you do.
Yeah.
And I don't care about like John Lord and Rod Stewart's penises. Like I really don't.
Sure. It's a shame that that's a focus for, that people will kind of like take her interview or take the coverage in that direction, because I mean, they're a deeply serious band. And I mean, at this point, like, the occult and satanic stuff in metal has been in our face and so overplayed that it's, it's just like, it's hard to take seriously, I guess, or it's not scary generally anymore, just because we've seen it so much.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, back then it was not only scary, but I mean, it was totally genuine for them, which I think is also more than you can say for like, a lot of bands I think just kind of flirt with that stuff. But she was full on occult. She came from it in her background. Her family was into all kinds of weird spirituality and shit like that. So yeah, what a legend for sure.
Totally. And they basically drove her out of the business for a while because she was a woman, because she was outspoken, because of the subject matter. And I know that Sabbath got a lot of threats and a lot of protesters and stuff, but like they definitely did not, suffer the way her career suffered.
No way.
And it has to be because she's a woman, and a smart woman at that. And
it was just that combination of just all kinds of stuff, of them maybe being a little bit too ahead of the time, right when it just wasn't quite the right moment, and then Sabbath was just right after. And who knows, it is a weird thing to like, you kind of, once you look at the stories of how bands become legends and the huge bands that we know, it really is just all these factors that are essentially like luck and being in the right place at the right time and making like fucking legendary music. But then there's also all these legends who just get tossed by the wayside. I think Wino is kind of another, like, everybody in Doom knows Wino, but outside of the heavy music world, people don't really know him. But I mean, to the people who know who Wino is, he's Ozzy. He's a metal fucking legend. He's a metal god, he's just Wino. He bleeds doom metal. And he's a super nice guy. I had the pleasure of meeting him and playing with their band a couple times, and just totally genuine person. Yeah, very cool guy.
The nicest guy. Although it's not a huge feature of your book, I think it's interesting that it's discussed, and I think it's nice that we're cognizant of it, you're cognizant of it. There is a socioeconomic kind of
Yeah.
Just kind of a cultural thing that runs through heavy metal. The
Yep.
reason it's not popular, the reason it's heavy, the reason it's dark, the reason it's doom, why this music is what it is. It does have to do with people. It is a class struggle. It is
Yeah.
a racial struggle. It is a sexism struggle. It's a patriarchal struggle in some cases. For the women led by the bands led by women, there's a definite fighting to be respected, and it should not still be the case, but
For sure.
they're all chicks, how novel.
Right.
Female fronted is a thing that it makes me fucking nuts, and everybody
Yeah.
who reads my writing knows that I frequently say, I will just jump into Twitter and be like, female fronted is not a genre.
Yeah. It's not
Because
a
male
genre.
fronted
Yeah.
is not a genre, and you're all
Yeah.
idiots. But
Yeah.
it is awesome to see, this is a music that cuts across every divide, every cross section, and can be and should be, like all music, a safe place for everybody, which
Yeah.
is, I think you've mentioned it here and there, but I wanted to just kind of bring it up now.
Yeah, I totally agree. Couldn't agree more. Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that really drew me into Doom, especially, is that, I've always been a fan of like hardcore and punk too, and I think the thing that like really got me stoked on hardcore and punk was just that ethos of anyone can play music. So it's don't just be a fan, like come on and do this thing, come be part of this with us. And I always felt like Doom and sludge has that same vibe. And to me, I'm not like a super technical drummer or anything. I can't play jazz, or I don't have the crazy like Benny Greb chops and shit like that people have. But yeah, I mean, I think I've found a community of musicians and friends just by playing what you love and just trying to take it seriously and doing as much as you can, even if there are limitations, and trying to find interesting things to do, I guess, with those limitations. And I see a lot of that with yeah, I guess I'm trying to think of who would be a good example of, like I Hate God back in the day when they started, they weren't like technical virtuosos. I think they've gotten super talented over the years just by, you know, virtue of having played in a band for 30 plus years. But yeah, I think that's how it was for a lot of those bands. They didn't start out as like these guitar whizzes of, people who could play like mind-blowingly fast death metal. So yeah, I've always really believed in that ethos that it should be for everyone, and trying to just make it as inclusive as possible, I think, is the mission right now. And it's rad to see a bunch of bands really doing that.
Word. And I know it's it's very easy. I think people like to compartmentalize. It makes them easy, makes things easier to understand. So we go from like stoner rock to what is essentially doom metal and early heavy metal, proto metal, proto punk. And I like that you cover all these little things and on and on. As a writer, how did you just sort of qualify and categorize all this stuff for yourself before you boiled it down into chapters? Or did you start write about scenes and bands and it just developed from there? How'd you go about it?
Yeah, I think once I figured out that I wanted to do the history of doom metal, because I've thought about all these subgenres and different things for forever, for sure. And I'm kind of just growing up as like a metalhead kid. It's like, well, what does it mean? Like, why do some people say sludge, and then what is the difference between sludge and doom, or is it just made up? My wife will like kind of joke around with me and said, I think you're just making it all up. And I can, it totally can seem that way of like, well, what's the point of these distinctions if it's just slow and heavy at the end of the day? But yeah, as far as like it coming together, I was just really thinking about how different the kind of ideological approach can be between bands, and like where they're trying to get with music. And so when I describe like the difference between doom and sludge, I think Yob to me is like a doom band, like a perfect example of a doom band. And I think with their songs, they're really trying to reach for something larger than themselves. And I think you could say the same for like Sleep and Ohm, which is why I put Sleep and the Doom. And they're just trying to reach for something bigger, you know, some kind of spiritual, you know, experience, or it can be any kind of thing, but just I think bigger than the human experience. And so, but then I see sludge as way more punk, mired in hardcore. And so again, I Hate God, where if you look at the lyrics, it's just concrete stuff from everyday life, you know. It's just all like very concrete and kind of comes from the gutter essentially. And so I think as I would like read more about these bands and hear about where they're coming from ideologically, like it really does mean a lot to the bands, you know. They're very deliberate about what they're trying to get at with the music and what they're trying to explore and stuff like that. And so I felt like kind of categorizing it in that way was a way to honor that in you know, to a certain extent, of like trying to place bands who really are trying to reach for that kind of larger metaphysical thing or whatever, versus again, you know, like News Crush or something like that. Like I said, I Hate God, where it's just like just very, very concrete. And again, it's, you know, it's kind of more like societal negativity, and at the same time, you know, there's so much spillover. And then there's bands who make it totally indistinguishable of like, you know, it completely melds into each other. I think Neurosis is a good example, where they started as more along the punk and kind of social commentary, but then it turned into just this insane metaphysical thing. And I still I wouldn't call Neurosis a doom band though. There's some, you know, there's some weird other thing. And I think Post Metal is the go-to just because we don't know what else the fuck to call it.
Right, they continue to evolve and change,
Yeah.
which I dig. And I mentioned I talked to Amin Ra earlier today, Colin, and they continue to just shape shift. And it's like I know it's still us, but I don't know what it is. Like,
yeah.
And you know, I think that's what's interesting about all this stuff. I love that you actually talked a lot about punk and that you have punk roots. I always feel like, and this isn't a knock on any particular bands, but I do feel like there's in good punk music or good punk scenes, there's an intimacy and an honesty that I, a lifelong metalhead who likes punk and loves a lot of punk bands, I see a disparity between the two. Like the punk scene to me was always first, most welcoming, most reputable, most, you know, not always, but sometimes. And the metal culture and metal fans and metal bands was very bro-y and the fold your arms in the back of the room. Before I was ever into black metal, I had that experience with thrash metal where people were like, these guys suck and I hate everything, you know, like, and I never got that with punk. And I wasn't a punk. I was correct and say I was not a truly a punk person, but I hung around that scene, and my first shows ever that were not like a big production in an arena was a punk show, and like it affected me and my taste and how I view music and how I view scenes and people. So it's interesting that like there's this really cool brotherhood around Doom fans and sludge fans. You know, you're not in this music because you're passive. You have to actively seek it out and become, you're part of this fan base because you want to be here.
Yeah. And it really does, you know, kind of, I mean, for a while there, like Doom, and it had become the like cool thing again, but now that's gone. I feel like death metal is as far as like kind of underground bands, and you know, there's always, even within the underground, there's trends for sure. And so I feel like death metal is like the thing now, and there's a million rad bands who are doing just crazy shit with it. But I feel like now Doom and sludge has become the the unwanted, again, stepchild, which is probably where it's always meant to be. But yeah, I totally agree. I was never a punk myself either. I mean, me and my buddies would listen to that stuff, but yeah, I think I had that similar experience of just seeing metal bands in arenas, and it's rad, it's great, it's its own thing. But then once I started seeing bands in smaller venues and just that interaction, and I think part of that for me comes from, you know, growing up and riding DMX, and it's a very like accessible culture as far as like being able to get to know pros and seeing people around and stuff. And so I always really respected that with Doom and sludge, of like, you know, even the biggest bands of the genre are playing like mid-sized theaters at best usually. And I mean, in general, it's pretty easy to talking to those people. And from my experience, you know, most of them are very approachable.
Nice. I'd like to know, what was the band or the sort of scene you felt you learned the most about through writing the book?
Oh man, good question. As far as like shedding, gaining new knowledge that I didn't really have, I would probably say the really early post Sabbath doom. I knew Saint Vitus and I knew Candlemass. I knew like Trouble, and I knew all those bands, but I didn't know it really well, and I didn't know the history behind a lot of that stuff. And so yeah, I would say probably that was the biggest exploration phase, and the earlier stuff of like the history of amplification and doom. And before I started researching this book, I didn't know the whole Coven story of like Coven having this Black Sabbath song, and then Sabbath, you know, initially being named Earth and then changing the name to Black Sabbath and still denying that it has anything to do with Coven. And when you line it all up, I'm like, just why don't you guys just say, yeah, we got the name from a Coven song? It's not tons of band name, you know, bands get their name from a song from another band. It's not like, oh, you guys got your name from another band, you know, your music is immediately irrelevant. That's not the case at all. So it's pretty confusing that they still deny like any, you know, no, we did not get it from Coven. I'm like, all right, whatever. But so yeah, I learned a lot there as well. But again, that kind of post Sabbath doom of learning really like where Wino came from and his background, and these people talking about playing doom when, you know, in general, the public did not want to hear that. They did not want to hear, especially, you know, like I think metal in itself is pretty niche, really, when you look at popular culture as a whole. And so, like when thrash was really popular, then you have these metalheads within metal culture playing stuff that's antagonizing to its own culture. It's pretty funny, and it really does kind of doom itself to be in the underground to a certain extent. And I think that's also a beautiful thing. I don't think it's negative at all. I think it makes you operate from that place of passion. But yeah, Trouble and hearing about the, you know, just Trouble, it really is a Christian band. I thought that was so fascinating that, you know, like this music that you typically think of being like completely occult and just all about dark arts and, you know, kind of Electric Wizard vibes and stuff like that. But, you know, really Black Sabbath and Trouble, like there's a lot of Christian stuff. Trouble is a straight up Christian band. Sabbath has some Christian lyrics for sure. And that's just fascinating to me of just, you know, it's complex, just like the people who make it. And yeah, just super interesting to read about these kind of bands struggling with their spirituality. And Trouble especially I thought was fascinating because it's not like a black and white, like we love Jesus and we love God and you should too. It's not really the message. It's pretty dark and complicated of like, you know, I think this world and life, I think we're on the wrong path. I think I see so much negativity in the world, and he's still, you know, really trying to reconcile that with spirituality. So yeah, that was super fascinating. And hearing about Candlemass and the early recordings of Epicus, Demicus, Metallicus, and how really shitty the scenarios were of just recording in like these frozen basements essentially. So yeah, I'd say long answer short that era of like kind of mid 80s doom was probably the biggest knowledge gaining experience in writing the book.
Nice. Just really briefly, because I don't want to squirrel down a rabbit hole with this, but I do feel that doom metal and these other genres and culture of music and metal, there's kind of a thing where, okay, you're supposed to be crazy and we're
Right.
supposed to be dark and we're supposed to be moody and we're supposed to be on drugs. But it's also like completely skirting the fact that people have mental health problems
Yeah.
and real life is hard for a lot of people who have been in these bands. And, you know, it's like I love Ozzy and I love Dio. And like I think the bad guy is always interesting to root for in the movies, but also like real life is troublesome. and hard.
Yeah.
And I think there's this like idea that metal and doom and heavy metal is synonymous with being crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, there's that rock guy, he's
Yeah.
crazy. But I wanted to know if through the music, if you found any, counterpoint to that. I think there's a lot of depth that the average casual fan doesn't see in our
Sure.
music that kind of dispels this.
Yeah, for sure. I think Neurosis is probably my go-to example, and I think I've really looked up to Steve Von Till, especially, and really all those people. But when I discovered that Steve Von Till, and I don't know if he's still doing it. Last time I checked, he was, but he was a kindergarten teacher. That was just like the sickest thing to me because, yeah, I myself, I had my like period of drinking and doing drugs and stuff, and kind of, just I wanted to see what that whole side of life was about, and I realized 2 years in that it wasn't for me, and yeah, I've been sober ever since. So this coming up this September, it'll be 15 years, and I mean, really, it's essentially it's a pretty quiet life. Yeah, so I feel like a lot of the people I gravitate toward are not necessarily the craziest hard partiers and stuff. And so, yeah, like I said, Steve Untitled of Neurosis, that he could balance being in just this absolutely legendary band and still making crushingly heavy records and going on tours and playing mind-blowing shows, and still, when he goes back to it, he's a kindergarten teacher. I think that's so gnarly. Ethan McCarthy is another one of Primitive Man that he when I was living in Denver, and I met him when he was doing Clinging to the Trees of a Forest Fire, which was before Primitive Man, and then that one turned into Vermin Womb. But so yeah, he's playing basically the ugliest music you can imagine, basically that you can even fathom, and it is about all this social negativity and stuff. But he was working with kids, like that was his job, and I thought that stuff was so rad because I did, in my early 20s when I was kind of trying to find my own path, I discovered that I also love, I was a teacher for a long time, and now my job is I do technical writing for a software company, and yeah, I feel like a lot of my closest friends are just, we kind of have this professional side to us, and it's just like you said, kind of the adulting thing, but then there's this other side that to me feels a little bit more true. It just is not a money-making enterprise, but we just love this super harsh music. So yeah, I think I really gravitate toward those people who dispel that myth of metalheads being super hard partiers. I remember I was in a band a couple years ago, and one of the dude's friends, he told me, you can't have 1 foot in and 1 foot out. And basically what he meant was like, you can't have a band and teach and do, that's what he was basically telling me. It's such a weird thing to tell somebody. I was like, my counter immediately was like, no, dude, that's like, here's all these people that do both, and I will continue to also do both because I feel like they feed in, they feed into each other well too. Of like, I am kind of at the end of the day, pretty quiet and somewhat boring, and so I don't constantly want to be in like the club and party scene. And I've done just a little bit of touring, and it is rad, but it's not necessarily like what I'd say I would want to be like my primary source of income or trying to make a living through it. So yeah, I really enjoy that, being able to go and hang out with some kind of, there are gnarly metalheads out there who I also, I have tons of great friends who also party pretty hard and, maintain different adult responsibilities and shit like that. So yeah, I really love to have both sides of that in my life, of that kind of really quiet side, and now being a dad, which is just, to a little girl, it's just all cute shit and just fuzzy and, love and stuff. But then meanwhile, I'm still listening to Buzz Oven. That's probably, I kind of took a break from some doom and sludge after writing the book, just because I was in that headspace for so long, And I think the bands but I've been recently going back pretty hard again, and I've been on a buzz oven kick lately, and so yeah, it's a funny balance listening to buzz oven with my daughter of just like the super ultra negative music. I might switch that one when she's old enough to realize what what it is, or maybe not. I don't know.
We'll see. You never know.
Yeah,
I got into it little, and I never really went back, even though I like a lot of different other stuff. So good news, you have the paperback version of Doomed to Fail coming out soon.
yeah,
Let's talk a little bit about that, and as we wind this down,
sure.
anything else you want to talk about, promote, other cool stuff? I see your music gear behind you.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's talk about the paperback.
Okay, yeah. So the paperback is coming out on October 12th. The hardcover came out at the end of February, which was the book launch, and so that was really when COVID hit the fan essentially. So I would have done a lot more. I did one reading event, and just like everything else, in the COVID year of pandemic, it was this sideline that I couldn't really do that side of promotion. And yeah, I mean, I'm not going to really whine about it because ultimately my life is pretty easy during the pandemic compared to a lot of people. But I would have loved to be able to, go on some different book tour type stuff, or just go and do some reading dates in different places and just celebrate it with Doom fans. Because the opening thing that we had here in Long Beach was fucking great. It was so much fun of hanging out with friends and meeting new friends and just talking about Doom and Sludge and all this stuff with people. So anyway, yeah, the paperback is coming out October 12th. I would love to be able to do some events for that. So yeah, I guess watch my social media because we'll be posting about it ridiculously. As far as music, I've been really, I've messed with doing all my own, like, kind of one-man band. I had done it a couple times over the years, and I felt like I was kind of getting close to what I wanted to do. But during the pandemic year, well, I played drums for a band called Drainage. That's like kind of has a bunch of sludge elements, but also like kind of like coalesce style metalcore and stuff like that. But I didn't practice with them during the pandemic because essentially as soon as I found out, as soon as we found out my wife was pregnant, I didn't want to go to the practice space anymore because there's a bunch of people in and out, and it just freaked me out. And it sucked because I love playing music with Drainage. Those Ricky and Dee are two of my favorite people in the entire world. And so it was really just kind of coping to a certain extent of, just doing all my own thing. And, but yeah, it's evolved, I guess. And I think it's kind of a trend in my life of, even if I start something and kind of in jest or like, oh, I'm not going to take this that seriously, it very quickly escalates into like, this is the thing I'm doing. And so yeah, I've been doing my solo project called River Snake, and it's been fun to I was really kind of like going, as I was thinking about the roots of Sludge when I was writing the book, of like Black Flag and Flipper playing these essentially like really slow hardcore songs as a troll. It was always meant as like it was tongue in cheek. So it always was like, okay, you guys are gonna, you want to hear bands go faster and faster and faster. So we're gonna go out there and just play slow and just completely punish people. And I thought that was hilarious. And there is this, there's this humorous element to the early roots of the genre that I really tried to get back to. And it's just been fun to write these kind of tongue-in-cheek lyrics and try and get better at guitar. Because, yeah, I can play drums, but string things are very tough. So it's been fun to really try and practice and just have fun writing riffs and getting better. So yeah, anyway, my solo thing is called River Snake, and I think that's probably it as far as stuff I want to promote.
All right, we'll be looking forward to hearing that. And yeah, man, it's just been a pleasure getting to hang with you and hear your story and rap about this music. JJ Anselmi, author, musician, father, owner of an awesome cat who's been hanging out behind you this whole interview. And
she's named Jinx, actually.
Amazing.
Jinx Dawson, yeah.
Hails. Jinx would want us to hails that cat.
Fuck yeah.
And yeah, man, it's just been a pleasure getting to hang out with you. Thank you so much for hanging out with Ghost Cult and sharing your story. And we're looking forward to this paperback, and we'll promote everything we can in the description of the interview.
Fuck yeah. Thanks so much. Big fan of what you guys do with Ghost Cult forever.